Welcome back, and we're in the final segment of our mid-morning talk. And I thoroughly enjoyed being back, and I hope you, as listeners, have enjoyed our segments thus far. And now it's time for educational insights. We are always maintained that for me, education is leading a child towards responsible adulthood. That is what the core for me is in terms of the educational journey. It's the parent and the community on one side, and your support system, your home support system, your community support system, and the other hand, it's all the role players involved. So your educational institutions, as well as all the support systems that assist educational institutions. So those two uh, adult components of bodies are then holding the hands of a child on either side, and the focus is to lead them towards responsible adulthood so that they become productive members, contributing members of society. And today I'm so pleased because uh, joining me shortly is Shakira Akabor, and she is a postgraduate fellow at UNISA. And recently, she uh, she did her research regarding rewards and academic achievements. And just a bit of background, she's been a primary school teacher since 2003 and at university levels since 2015. She has completed her PhD in inclusive education at the University of Witwatersrand last year. And Shakira's research interests are on the reduction of competition at schools and the way in which all learners in the classroom focus. She's also an aspiring student of Deen, Alhamdulillah, and studied at the Foundational Islamic Institute at the Medina Institute. So let me welcome her and let's focus on her research, more importantly, her research findings. Assalamu alaikum, Shakira, and welcome to Salam Media.
Assalamu rahmatullah, Mariam. Jazakallah for having me here today.
So your research for me has been long time coming, and I think for many who ascribe to this, who actually are opposed of the current reward systems that children get acknowledged by, or learners get, or have to work towards. For me, it was highly problematic. So for me, your research is an affirmation in terms of we need to relook at how we reward learners for the academic achievements as well, and also this whole concept of rewarding while you're developing, because education is all about development. And at what point you start rewarding development and it makes it an achievement or reaching a milestone in, we know that especially early on you have various time frames to reach milestones. So maybe at that time, if a learner hasn't yet reached the milestone, it's just that they're in a process of developing and they're not necessarily a failure. So even those words for me, pass and fail is really, really problematic in terms of educational growth and development, because everybody peaks differently. Hence, we are all individuals. And I feel your experience in inclusive education really assists in terms of understanding children within a context of education, and then also how we grade them and how we reward them. So tell me more about this research.
Okay, so in my research, I went to two public schools in the Gauteng province. And public schools meaning they're not private or independent schools, they are run by the state. And the two schools that I went to have a history, or shall I say, a reputation or tradition of, high academic achievement, of rewarding academic achievement. And this is another thing in itself. When we describe the school and we say, if I describe it to you, obviously I'm not going to disclose the names of the schools. But if I just simply say to you that these are schools that are well known or have a tradition of rewarding, then immediately parents associate like a high quality of education with that school, because naturally you would see, oh, the school is in the paper, or they're producing so many matric A's, or whatever the case may be. And it's always the word is that it's always public and it's visible, it's all over. And many parents use that as a benchmark. Future parents, parents who wish to put their children in good schools, we all want, every single parent wants for their child the best possible and high quality education. So that then brings the question is, if we are rewarding such a small number of learners, and in my study at both the schools, at one school it was 12.5%, and the other school it was 13% of learners who were being rewarded. So I looked at grade 11 learners at the two schools. I first surveyed them. So they 104 learners completed the survey. From that 104 learners, then we had focus group interviews in 4 small groups, and I interviewed a total of 23 learners. So these are now focus group interviews, last about an hour, and you have a session where the researcher, which was myself, with the groups of learners talking about, the various things about rewards and what they enjoy or don't enjoy, what they find motivational or demotivating, and so on, about the rewards. And the feedback that I got was actually quite surprising. All learners want to be rewarded. That was hands down the most important thing. There was not a learner who said, we shouldn't be rewarding learners. However, the issue was how we are rewarding learners. And we are not saying learners don't deserve recognition. That is not the issue. The issue is that we have to look at how this reward system feeds into the way we actually promote teaching and learning in our schools, and how it shapes the way we teach in the classroom. And when we teach in the classroom, are we allowing rewards to become, or the possibility of rewards, or possibility of gaining high marks, or expectations of gaining high marks, do we allow that to determine whether learners answer questions or not, who answers our questions, whose work is preferred, whose work is celebrated, whose work is always, how can I say, brought to the fore, whose work is always spoken about. And we need to ask ourselves those questions in terms of how the reward structure features in the way we teach and the way the students learn. And I think that is where inclusive education comes in.
Okay, so from your research, Shakira, what are some of the disadvantages uh, between the competition between learners? What have you then deduced from your focus group interviews?
Okay, so the learners themselves felt that there's a lot of pressure on them from the school side, and mostly from their parents. Some learners, specifically a group of very high achievers, were really fed up. They said, "We tired. We tired of working, because it means every single weekend we have to be in with the books. Our friends are out there and enjoying their social lives, and we can't, because we considered achievers, and we have to spend all our weekends with the books. You have to get consistent A's in order to achieve." Different colored blazers and different colored ties and all those kind of things. And those things are long-term rewards, which means it's not only this term, this semester, this, whatever. It's more like for the past 4 years. By the time you're in grade 11, you are getting a different colored blazer, or you are, poised to be possible A students in matric, and you are labeled as such. So they didn't like that. The second thing they didn't like was the identity that was associated with being an award winner. So it was not that, yes, award winners do get a lot more privileges, which they all admitted and explained and described. But it is also that when you fall from that position, then you basically, it's like a fall from grace. And that many learners described how they no longer felt happy taking a report home. The one girl I remember specifically saying to me that my mother just asks, "How many awards will you be getting?" And she was not interested in my actual percentages. She just wanted to know, how many awards will I be getting? And I think that the pressure felt by the learners is very real. Remember, these are adolescents. Grade 11s are between the age of 16 to 18. They could be 16, they could be 17, some are even almost 18. So we're looking at children who are at a very vulnerable stage in their life in terms of identity formation. We need to look at how the rewards actually affect them. More broadly speaking, there were many learners who used to win awards and stopped winning awards, and they felt that suddenly their efforts were not recognized, and they felt that they were no longer seen as part of the so-called, in their words, the smart class or the dumb class. And these are things that they're labeling themselves with. And whether the school says, "Oh, well, learners It's not from us and school. Yes, of course, schools are not going to label children as smart and dumb. But if we create a situation where learners can see it for themselves and they start using these labels, then we need to question, what are we doing that's allowing this to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're speaking, the environmental structure is there because in I do a lot of student mentoring and counseling, and when learners come to me, they see it's very much aligned to their personality, their self confidence. They see themselves in two categories: am I part of the smart group, or am I part of the underachievers? And they even view them. They take on these labels and they adopt these labels, and those
Mm,
labels determine their future progress. So they would very much say, you know what, I'm not as smart as my friends, or I'm not part of the smart group.
mm,
I'm part of, so they actually label themselves smart, the average group, and then the underachievers. And for me, those labels have self-fulfilling prophecies because that's just how they're going to achieve. But very interesting is you said those that cannot sustain this rewards or these accolades and that they then start really digressing because no longer interests are shown. So even if there was an achievement, but because that achievement was not rewarded, we're discounting those achievements. And it, I mean, as somebody who's in this field of inclusive education, this does have a profound impact on the education academic progress. Yes or no?
absolutely. So the learners there was a group of learners who ended up in the demotivated phase, and they were the ones who used to win, as you said, who used to win the awards and now are demotivated because they no longer felt that they were good enough to win awards. So if we are saying that rewards, because most schools will tell you the reason they reward is so that they motivate the learners to do better, which is a noble intention, which is a good intention. However, we need to broaden that and see beyond rewards what else motivates learners to learn, and how then can we majority of the psychological research on rewards focuses on intrinsic or internal motivation versus extrinsic or external motivators. So we need to look at the ways in which, and the better of the two for learning specifically, would better quality learning, lifelong learning, learning for true passion for learning, is the intrinsic motivation. We need to find ways in which we can encourage intrinsic motivation in our learners and not focus too much on the outward and the extrinsic. Because another problem that will surface if learners only do it for the reward, only do it to outdo their peers, only do it to become the best and outperform everyone else, to be the winners rather than the losers. And this is a problematic in itself, that we create the situation where we have winners versus losers. Every child should be valued, or every child should be allowed to participate in the lesson. Every child who has something to say should be given the opportunity to do so. And I think that when we create the winner loser situation, you're also going to create fear in the minds of the learners who don't see themselves as winners. When they don't see themselves as winners, they're not going to participate in the lesson. When you have less participation in the lesson, specifically in the high school phases, where learners are dealing with their own psychological issues, with their own hormonal issues, they've got other things that they're battling with. And now we're adding to that this kind of stressor, that they're not good enough to answer, or if they answer, they might make a comment that is not correct or not acceptable, or they might feel that they are going to be laughed at. And these are the kind of situations we need to reduce. If we can reduce that level of anxiety and stress, we will open up the participation in the classroom to more learners. The greater the participation in the lesson, the better the results in tests. And any teacher will tell you that. The less children participate in the lesson, the worse they will do in the assessments and the tests. So if we can get more learners to participate and increase our participation levels, then we're going to see a higher level of learners who do better. We can improve the quality of educational outcomes across the board for everybody. We cannot allow ourselves to focus on a select few who are super achievers whilst ignoring, at the expense of, or ignoring the participation levels of the rest of the children. And I think that has
I'm
become
Shakira, I'm 100% in agreement with everything you say, verbatim, because, and also those high achievers, from my research, and that their aptitude was there. They were predisposed. The school system supported their personality, their aptitude, it was made for those achievers, this whole system. But sadly, I'm sure your research has also revealed they a very, very small percentage, the ultra high achievers and those that qualify for whether it's that blazer, that honors blazer, the pun, the tie. I mean, that percentage, even if you get the school to show us over a 15-year period how many qualified to make that mark, it's a very, very minute percentage of the learner population. Yes, like you say, noble indeed to strive for it, but we know that is an ideal that very, very few will receive. And also, how did we recognize those along the way who made incredible strides? So you started off in grade six as a 60%, and you climbed to 65, 7. So by the time you came to grade 11, you are 72% learner. But did anybody recognize this 20%? But yet that student was a 82 up to now, he even dropped to 80, which is a decline. But because he had 80, he qualified for it, even though there was a drop. So who recognizes this 20% growth in development of learner C, who then was motivated, didn't reach there? But how do
Yeah,
you acknowledge the strive? Because then in matric, he's going to say, what am I crying for? Because I didn't make it, and get demotivated. So now tell me, I mean, research is for purpose and for us to improve situations and make it better. What
yes.
are some of your expert suggestions as a researcher, as somebody experienced in inclusive education? What would be some of the more appropriate reward systems that schools and also parents, because parents, we are part of this. I was also a parent who was part of this. Oh, did you get an award? Are you getting, or even await that letter? You know, schools send you that letter before that you need to attend the awards, and we all wait for that letter. And 3 days before it comes, did you get your letter? Did you get your letter? I hope you got this letter. And we don't realize while you were speaking, I realized I have to confess, sadly, and I'm ashamedly, I was one of that parent at some time, and I think we learn from there and we grow from there. So tell me, as a school, how what is a more appropriate reward system? And at home, as parents, can we implement some kind of own family reward system to get our learners intrinsically motivated?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Look, as Muslims, we also have to look at it the way in Islam, how it affects us, right? I presume your audience is mainly Muslim, so I'm going to go with that slant. If we look at the reason why we do things, we are told to do things for ikhlas, for the pleasure of Allah. And if we're gonna only work for outward, for outward rewards, we then it will affect our sincerity in what we do. So I think too, in terms of every family, there are schools in Europe, many countries, Germany, Finland, Sweden, just to name a few, there are many more, who have no reward system. There is no such thing as we give top marks for top prizes for anything. Whether you got the highest in maths, or you got 70 in maths, or you got 65 in maths, you get no rewards, nothing, zero. So, and yet these countries, we cannot even say that they produce bad educational systems because they don't. So we need to ask ourselves, yes, I know it's a huge leap from where we are as South Africans, because we've always had a rewarding system. In some schools, the reward system goes back 80, 100 years as a tradition. So it's so much part and parcel of the way we look at education. It's going to be difficult to move away from it, but it's not impossible. That's the first thing. The second thing is to look at rewarding an entire class. If we take an example that if you look at the grade R learners who move into grade 1, right? Nearly every single preschool rewards all the children. And if we look at that system of rewarding everybody, right? Why is it that we wait for all children to reach their milestones and move up to grade 1 from grade R? But after that, from grade 1 onwards, now we are only rewarding the top 3, top 5, top 10. I don't know. It's unique to each school how they do it. But the point is that we suddenly making children until grade R, all children, everyone's development is important. From grade 1 onwards, we saying, well, either they made it or they didn't make it. They will pass or they will fail. And where is the support given to all those grade 1 learners to make sure all of them progress? Then from grade 2 into grade 3, and so on and so forth, until we reach a point where we are concerned about the learning of every single child. And I think that's the purpose. If we get to that point, however you want to reward, and each school must do it creatively with their pupils, with their parents. They must have these conversations with, we call the triangle of education, the learner, the parent, and the school. Those are the three corners of, the foundation of who the stakeholders in schooling. And if we as schools start going back to the parents, going back to the learners, and asking them, and doing a creative process of finding out and investigating what will work for our school, what will work for our learners, what do our learners need, how can we encourage intrinsic motivation, these are the questions we need to ask. My study focused on investigating the problem of rewards, right, and how rewards can be problematic to the learning of all. But my recommendations as somebody who has come through that process now is we need to engage in dialogue. We need to speak to the students. We need to speak to the parents. We need to speak to even teachers, because even some teachers express their doubts about the system. And there were many teachers. Some teachers believe, well, they worked hard and they deserved it, therefore they are the elite. In the words of one teacher, they are the elite. And that in itself is a problem. We should not be creating a schooling system where we look at some learners as the elite, because then you are justifying inequality. And we can't justify inequality, because every learner in our care, they are amanat to us. And every learner has the right to a quality education. We can't give to some and not give to others. And those are questions we need to ask ourselves as educationists as well. I hope that answers your question, Mariam.
Sorry, I was on mute. Absolutely. I'm so pleased what you said is now backed by empirical research, because for years I've been saying this, but I don't think there was enough, especially localized research. There must have been research overseas, but then you always get challenged that, you know what, this could work somewhere in Europe or somewhere like that. But the fact that you had done South African research within a South African context as well, I mean, you use, because that is how schools market themselves. Is we had so many matrix, so many A's in matric, so many distinctions, so many university entrance passes, and as a parent, that informs your decision. Okay, this is a good school because this is what they have achieved. But the thing is, we as parents, we fail to look at the percentage of learners that had attained that. So it might be four distinctions per learner. So yes, you might have in excess of 200 distinctions, but it's the same pool of learners that are attaining this distinction. It wasn't maybe 500 distinctions, and out of 400 or 500 pupils, then we can put things in perspective. So braining around numbers and things like that has no consequence if we don't see them in relation to the broader school population or community as well. So I'm so pleased we now have, and we have to credit you definitely for giving us this research. So it gets schools and school management, even school governing bodies who are the parent representatives at the school, to really look at their reward system going into the future. And yes, you know what, we can't be bogged down in tradition, because some schools arrive challenges. Well, this is it. This is the tradition of the school. We had various trophies that are named after people who have uh, donated it to school. Then you know what? Ask them to have a re-look at citations, because for me, even the citations for certain awards are very problematic in terms of what you have achieved. So the citations in itself are very, and also it has an impact because it gives, it doesn't allow those elite to ground themselves. Sometimes it turns them to be arrogant people, only later to fail at university, and then the knock is far greater for them psychologically as well. So I thank you for this fundamental research, and I'd like to get you on future shows to discuss inclusive education as well as parents, because excuse me, parents often don't know their rights in terms of parents and children's rights, in terms of inclusive education, and asking the school that it's my right, you need to accommodate my child, instead of marginalizing my child and saying, you know, my child is not fit for this environment. It's the other way around. That is why we have an inclusive education policy, and I'd like to focus on that, and you to discuss with us, what does inclusive education entail in a classroom, in a school environment. It's been an absolute pleasure, my kindred sister Shakira. Alhamdulillah, we both align and think the same way and passionate when it comes to education. Shukran for your time, and hopefully we'll chat to you on future shows on educational insights.
Okay. Jazakallah, Mariam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And yes, it's been a good show back. Mid morning on Mondays with Mariam. Yeah, a whole lot of M's and time to say shukran for allowing me the privilege of your company for the past 2 hours and looking forward to doing it in the future. And I thank the mighty and I like to a special thank to my all the engineers and producers virtually for keeping it together. And also, Alhamdulillah, we didn't have any gremlins in the system that would have caused me anxiety and nervousness. And Alhamdulillah, all in all, a great effort all round. And shukran for joining us. And do stay tuned. Tomorrow, mid morning continues with my colleague Miriam Makwinda, and on Thursday, my colleague Nafisa Dengo. And yes, we are back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings to all our listeners.